Welcome, and thank you so much for joining this webinar on a view and a very personal view on the state of digital adoption. I'm the CEO of ClickLearn. We are one of many digital adoption solution vendors. We are obviously one of the best. I'm going to try today to give you an overview of what does the market look like. And this is perhaps one of my favorite topics. I'm spending most of my days looking not just at my own product, but also looking at what other vendors are doing in the market. It's a fairly interesting area, the digital adoption space. It's growing enormously. We've never seen more people with digital adoption in that title than we have today. So I think that we are on a very, very good roll. And I think that what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit about how do we actually place solutions inside the digital adoption solution space. And I'll talk a little bit about the trends of 2022. And we are obviously also going to touch a little bit about on what does the future look like. And this is a unique perspective because I'm one of the vendors that's inside this space. And I can tell you that there is enough for everyone to do, although we are many in this space. So get ready for the state of digital adoption. So first off, let's see if we can define what a digital adoption solution is. It's contextual, so it's presenting the end users with processes that are in the context of what their current intent is. And that means that wherever the navigation takes you inside an IT system, everything that is being presented, everything that is being suggested to you is contextual. And this is more or less elegantly implemented among different vendors. So some are capable of actually inside the process finding out how far along are you in the process and actually taking to that particular space. Some are only capable of restarting the entire process and say, no, we recorded this from HC, you're going to have to take it inside. But contextually speaking, it's very important and perhaps one of the most important aspects of a digital adoption solution, because without the context, we are basically a very bad Google that will simply deliver loads of processes for you. The second thing is that the belief inside digital adoption solutions is that we are a centralized solution, that all training should be delivered inside the application that you have now. That goes for onboarding, what we call learn more, so electronic performance support, but also in the learn new. So whenever you have system updates, new features available for you, you should be able to take that training directly inside the application. And the intelligence around this is enormously important because, as I mentioned earlier, otherwise it would simply be meaningless, endless processes just being presented. The third aspect of the digital adoption solution, one of the many promises, and probably one of the places where most digital adoption vendors are failing, is on the change management side. So the idea is basically that we're going to have to try and see from a vendor perspective, we can facilitate the client in that journey among many, many different apps. Now, today, the app space has grown enormously. So when we look at large enterprises, they have an average of 178 apps installed. That's an increase of 40% over the last 3 years. So no doubt that digital transformation is going on really fast, but there is no digital transformation without digital adoption. And the idea is that when you have 178 apps, it's obvious that updates are coming from your vendors left and right, and you need to be able to control that, both from new features, releasing those to your users, making them aware that we actually have improved functionality inside our application, but also obviously on the change management side, and this is something that's very dear to my heart, you need to be able to actually test that your GPS system inside the application that navigates all your users on a daily basis is working after the update. And very few solutions have that today. Now, the fourth aspect of digital adoption solution is obviously that there needs to be a cost reduction. So I think some of the obvious that everyone delivers is on the alternative methods of training. So you don't need to go into classroom training. You no longer need to train the trainer sessions or have super users that are training the users. And this becomes very vital because if you have 178 apps and you have 4 updates annually, imagine that you had to do classroom training. You probably have an entire staff that will do nothing but actually going into classrooms left and right in order to make sure that they're current. In the sense of production of content, this should obviously also take out some cost. When we're looking at cost reductions from that, we normally compare ourselves to what would it take to create an e-learning of sort of the same caliber as what we are implementing inside the application. And those production costs will absolutely see go down. I'm not sure what all vendors are saying, but from our perspective, we say that the savings are around 80%, what it would normally take. And if you're talking updates to existing content, we're up around 90-95%. And then finally, you should get a cost reduction in the maintenance. When we did the e-learning solutions in the old days, you would traditionally invest in the e-learning solution when you onboarded the entire staff. You'd have 7 updates after that, and you would not update the e-learning solution. So basically, you'd have outdated training material available for all new employees to train on. And this is obviously not a good idea. The idea inside the adoption solution is that it's fairly easy to drive the maintenance. There's a high cost reduction in the maintenance part of driving your digital adoption solution, or there should be at least. And then obviously you're going to see a reduction on support tickets and thereby the associated cost for that. So just a little bit about what space are we moving in when we're talking about the solutions. Now, basically, every single solution works in the same way. So everyone has an authoring solution on one side and a delivery platform on the other side. So the authoring solution is basically where you go in and you record or you create your processes inside the digital adoption solution. Now, on the other side is the delivery platform. I'm going to take you through some of the attributes of both of these solutions because they're fairly important to understand. Because there is this paradox in the digital adoption space that we want to select one solution and keep that for life, right? It's like buying a cigar box. You do that only once in your life, never again. And the problem there are many problems in that sense, but I'm going to try and see if I can hit some of those a little later. Now, if we look at the authoring solution, so obviously there's something in the recording technology. You need to have a very solid identification technology. You need to be able to identify what elements are you actually targeting inside this. And the good authoring solutions, they are also capable of understanding the user interface. So they're not just saying, oh, you clicked on something, tell me what you clicked on. But they're actually able to capture out not just the text, but also what kind of a button are you engaging with? What kind of control element? What kind of form are you engaging with? And that provides for the best possible instruction and, of course, the minimum amount of work if you get all that text provided to you automatically. Now, the second part of this is the associated data collection and conditionals. You need to be able to pick up different data inside the solution. It's not just about the data that you're seeing on the screen, but it's also about how you actually go inside a web application and get the role of the particular user that's inside the system right now. How do we determine his level of expertise inside the system? How do we find out what areas of the application does he have access to? And most authoring solutions have some way of collecting that data, whether it's far down inside HTML or JavaScript and picking that up. And based on that, you'll be able to provide different conditionals, either directly inside the process, saying we're going to branch the process into 2, depending on what role you have here, or maybe go the other way and say, this is only relevant for people in sales. So you're not going to see this process if you're not in sales. Now, the third part is the insights and analytics. So all the authoring solutions have access to insights and analytics around what are the users doing right now. Well, how are the users engaging with our? Is something breaking down? Are there elements in there that we can't find anymore? Do we have like a red alert that we need to immediately target? Or is it in fact working as it should be? And how much are the users actually following this? Did we provide too much text inside one of our elements on the screen that might actually get people to shut the entire system down and say, look, I'm not going to bother with this, I'll just try on my own. So it gives you a lot of insights to improve your processes inside its adoption solution. And then one of the things that, as I mentioned in the beginning, is very, very close to my heart is around the maintenance and the vendor updates. You need inside the authoring solution to have facilities that will enable you to take on new updates. First, secure that your digital adoption solution is working on that new update in an automated way. And second, make sure that you can deliver some sort of smartness around what is actually new inside the application. So if you have done new recordings on a particular application or a particular version, you should be able to distribute that as new news to the end users inside the delivery platform. But the idea of automatically taking in vendor updates and being able to test those before you go live on the digital adoption is very important. Remember that when you did the e-learning, you enabled your users once. The idea around digital adoption is there's obviously an enablement and an onboarding phase inside the digital adoption platform, but there's certainly also performance support. We want to drive the increased performance of our end users inside the application. And if a vendor updates suddenly means that your end users can no longer do what they used to do, that's a big problem. And on the second side is the delivery platform. This is actually what the end users are seeing inside their own application. So they are seeing walkthroughs, so presented in an intelligent way, either by popping up and telling you that now I have something that might be interesting to you. I think I know what you're trying to do. So why don't you take one of these walkthroughs and I'll walk you through the entire process. And the advantage of this is that it's a completely non-disruptive way of working with training because you're doing your work as you are training on the system. And the idea of non-disruption is very, very important when we look at especially the theory around what is driving digital adoption today. Normally inside the delivery platform, there's a notification platform as well. So this is very suitable for both delivering user messages like we are seeing decreases in the performance on our order system right now. Those types of notifications you're capable of pushing through. And typically you're capable of saying, what is the audience for the notification? How many times do I want to show it? Every time they start the application, only when they hit a particular form inside the application, stuff like that. So a notification system is obviously there. And then the delivery platform typically comes with an installation mechanism. Now, like 99% of the digital adoption solutions work solely on web applications. So if you're thinking of, I want to take Windows applications, web applications, you need to look at a solution that can actually deliver that for you. It's not out of the box. It's like 99% of all digital adoption solutions, they only deliver on web. And there are a number of different mechanisms for doing that. You can do like browser extensions. That's the preferred way for most vendors. The idea around scripts. So you can add a script into a particular system and then it will automatically trigger. It's a little difficult if you're running like Dynamic C in the cloud. Microsoft is probably not going to allow you to just say, look, I want to inject a script on our global server. So you're not able to do that. So probably you're going to work with extensions. Some of these installations can also happen from solutions that are dedicated to particular systems like C, F&O, PC, some of the major Dynamics platform, or even IFS. Now, the installation mechanisms, then the HTTP injections, and that's very, very nerdy, but typically there's a web server serving the entire installation. So every time you do a request to a server, you can actually inject into that and add your script on that HTTP injection. And some of the delivery platforms will also service that. It's mostly when you're hosted in. It's not so much in the cloud. I think that 90% of the times in the cloud, you're going to find out that it's either a dedicated solution working in your cloud environment, or it's an extension. You need to install a browser extension. And the problem with extensions is they're not always working on, let's say, a mobile device. Now, obviously, we have apps as well. So if you are serving like Windows applications, Mac applications, if your authoring solution provides those capabilities, you'll probably have an app that you can install, and the installation is more or less tricky around how to deploy that on the individual platforms. And some of the solutions can even take you cross-platform, meaning that you can start out in a web application, you can go to a Windows application, and then end up in a web application again. That's the things that we are working with, trying to create robust technology around cross-platform applications. All right. So just a quick overview and a brief time frame where we've been discussing digital adoption solutions. So basically, early solutions up until 2009, I would say, are very special purpose. So they are like electronic performance support systems. Typically, they had like a sheet next to the application where you could read through the instructions, not guiding you directly natively on screen. If you want to compare the digital adoption solutions to something, it's always remember the old Clipper that was a part of Microsoft Word. That is in its essence the digital adoption solution. And some of the people that are biggest theorists around the entire idea of training in the flow, they are actually part of the old team as well. Maybe that was a little immature at that time, the technology, but definitely the idea was there that we need to drive forward electronic performance support. And in 2010, you would see the birth of digital adoption solutions. So WalkMe, our solution, we started out in 2010 throughout the technology. And I think in 2019, the digital adoption solution became a Gartner category, and that certainly hit the market. I think in 2018, we were around 30 vendors in the space. Today, we are plus 400 vendors, solution vendors, and it obviously becomes a lot of me too if you're unable to distance yourself from competition in an effective way. And you will see a lot of me too's out there. Some of the biggest solutions are WalkMe, WatchFix. They have excellent solutions, primarily on web. ClickLearn is definitely a solution you should look at, especially if you care about maintenance, and obviously if you are going cross-platform in some of your processes, you'll be able to take you on that journey. So when we look at this, I always like to look at this from a triangle. And the idea around the triangle is basically that there are three parties inside this. So there are three parties that benefit from digital adoption. So if we start out with the software vendors, they have an absolute dollar sign in their eyes every time they discuss digital adoption, because the idea of effective user adoption and having users perform at their max is a key to avoiding churn, having high retention, and the drop-off in projects today is much higher than it was in the old days. So people are much more likely to discard technology if it's not working right out of the box. So software vendors are becoming vulnerable. Their business models, subscription-based models, are also increasingly vulnerable towards ineffective digital adoption. So there's certainly a push from the vendors to drive an effective digital adoption. And their idea is obviously, they want to create a superior onboarding experience for all their enterprises, and then they want to deliver as much standard content as they possibly can. And remember, from a vendor perspective, the only reason that exists is your own. Might open the door, but it's really all about your solution. Now, when we come to the partners, and typically when we are talking about larger ERP implementations, CRM implementations, you'll see that there's a software partner involved, from not the vendor directly. They have a very, very good idea of why they want to drive this, because if they enhance the user adoption, they will get a better customer experience and they will get better stickiness. So better stickiness with the client, and it definitely means more dollars as well. The one that's really closest to the heart of the enterprise is probably the partner. They know exactly what has been customized and what can, and probably they've applied much more than what comes from a single software vendor inside the solution. And the idea of making sure that processes are available for all of that is very, very necessary. And I think that the future will, to a very high degree, it's very interesting that very few digital adoption solutions today actually take care of this triangle, has a solution for everyone providing content. But we're definitely going to see that in the future. And when we look at the enterprises, they obviously want to enhance the content that they're getting from their software vendor. Today, we are in a position where our infrastructure contains a lot of small apps, special purpose apps. And it's impossible to take out vendor documentation, use that one-to-one inside your own business or enterprise, because the Lego pieces are simply different in your enterprise than what the vendor imagined, that you wall-to-wall have that single vendor inside your organization. So there's this unique cross-application experience that you need in order to facilitate your business processes and communicate them effectively to the end user. And you should be able to very, very easily be able to change the software vendor content and then apply that to your own enterprise with whatever changes you have, whatever your unique digital landscape looks like. And then obviously enterprises are really interested in maintaining the content at a low cost. Remember that if you take a commitment for delivering content in a digital adoption solution, you are also responsible for keeping it updated, because otherwise it's like having a broken GPS in your car, and it has absolutely no purpose. And if we take out the formal training out of the loop, we are very much relying on that digital adoption solution working all the time, not just in the beginning on the onboarding period, because we have infrequently performed tasks, and the users will never really learn those, and they will still rely on the digital adoption solution. If you imagine yourself, how good are you actually at finding roads in your local city after you got the key? I'm thinking you're a lot worse than when you had the map. And that's exactly the same thing with the digital adoption solution. So the thing is, I'm just going to look at this from the content creation part as well. So software vendors, they want to provide standard documentation out of the box. This is what our processes should look like. Software partners are in there customizing the living daylights out of the system. They know what is customized in terms of the single enterprise. They want to deliver that customized content to the enterprise. And the enterprise is looking from a different perspective. They're looking from the entire composable enterprise, all the little Lego bricks put together, and they want to drive all their unique processes into an effective training program inside the application. And unfortunately, this is very difficult. This is very, very difficult today. And I think that this is what we've seen in 2022 is that this is becoming an increasing problem. So after we actually took in the focus of digital adoption solution from a vendor perspective, from the partner perspective, and the enterprise perspective, we are probably in a relatively bad situation today. And I'll tell you why in a little while. Every single piece of content creation, if you change it, you own it. And it's when I talk to enterprise, I do that relatively often. And I typically ask them, so what's your post-implementation process around this? What's the organization that's going to drive this forward? And typically they're buying a solution for a single project. And that single project team is completely gone once the entire solution is implemented. That does not work for the digital adoption solution. You need to have a focused team inside your business that can drive both the changes, the updates forward. And you're gonna need to look at a solution that makes that really easy for you. Right. Okay, so where are we in terms of the entire triangle status? We have the software vendors, we have the partners, we have the enterprises. Well, one of the major problems is there's a lack of vendor standards. There's no formats, there's no interops inside the digital adoption solution. So imagine that your vendor selects a solution, XYZ, the customer already has another solution, ABC, and the partner is obviously going to deliver an XYZ. So that in terms means that we cannot use the standard documentation that is coming from the vendor. We are unable to customize that because the vendor has a different system. Now, today, the DaaS vendors are still considering their formats and the interops and identification and delivery platform like unique value proposition. And at some point, the entire industry needs to get away from that because we are keeping the enterprises hostage in this situation. So I think that we'll see a movement towards open standard among the DaaS vendors, probably some sort of interop so you can have multiple sources served inside a single system. A number of complications around it, a number of IP, a lot of IP that suddenly is closed for the entire world. We need to get around that. We simply need to find a solution because the enterprises are suffering. And it means basically that today the enterprises have the entire responsibility of creating every single piece of content that goes inside the digital adoption solution. And it's just not feasible. Now the vendor comes out with standard training material, most likely in a digital adoption solution. Unfortunately, it just wasn't the same one that the client had. There's a complete lack of support for this triangle, even among a single vendor. You don't see the support for the triangle. So vendor can come out with a range of standard documentation. The partner can enhance that documentation, deliver it to the client, and leave the responsibility there, taking out a lot of the stuff that's not relevant and allowing the customer to customize whatever they need in terms of their own composable enterprise. This is not happening today. There are very few solutions out there. I can tell you, we are one of the solutions because we are working heavily with partners and some vendors that are finding it very annoying if we were unable to support the entire journey. But still, we're running into clients that might have a different digital adoption solution. And we're going to have to say, look, we can't really help you because it's not an open-ended system. We wish that we could integrate into that particular platform that we love, but we are unable to do that with the content. So the end result is basically that instead of having that single DaaS platform on the enterprise side, you're going to see probably one platform for each single system that they have. And it basically also means that the expertise you're building up inside a user adoption team is going to be very difficult. Right? If you have to service 10 different applications for creating your content, depending on what platform you're on, it's not going to work. The second part is that if you're going cross-platform with technology where 3 or 4 different digital adoption solutions, I can tell you it's most likely going to break and you're going to be unable to do cross-application processes for your end users. And I haven't spoken to a single client that does say, look, we are absolutely inside. We want a single vendor strategy for our DaaS platform. All right, I'm going to touch a little bit on how vendors are trying to raise the bar in terms of how do we look pretty when we are like 400 people in the room, right? There are more than 400 vendors in there. How can we look pretty and how can we raise the bar? And there are basically 2 ways that we are going. I think that the AI part is going to be really, really interesting. I'll touch a little bit on that. But most of the vendors are actually trying to catch up on the basics. So I'll touch a little bit on both and some of the edge areas as well. So this is what I call the natural DaaS boundaries, right? It's data collection. The idea that you can collect data on what the user is doing inside the system. And it basically means that you can detect what kind of process are the users actually performing in here. You can also detect if I present the user with a choice of 4 processes and they are in a particular role and they are at a particular level of expertise, what did they select? And that gives a tremendous intent. And this is absolutely one of the areas where we'll see machine learning come in heavily. It's not that heavy yet, but it will come in. The second thing that most of the adoption solution providers are trying to enhance on is the improved application support. And there are basically 2 types of vendors out there. They're the ones that says, look, we don't think that the world is generic as such. We don't think that we should support everything equally well. We think that we should support some applications extremely well and the other applications just as well as the other DaaS are. Now, that means that those vendors will typically be more niche and typically target particular solutions to say that we have the best possible solution for this. But they will need a broad perspective. One of the things that we can see now with the vendors is that there are more and more features coming out that are specific to a single platform, like Salesforce, like Dynamics, that tries to cover some of the elements inside those platforms where we can enhance the experience for both the author side, but also for the end user side. So a lot of the DASs are sort of growing with better and improved application support on specific platforms. Now, a lot of DAS is also trying to improve the analytics part of this. I don't think we are there yet. To be honest, what we can present you with is basically, we had this many people do this. And I think that we can do much, much better with increased ML on the analytics side, because I don't think that it's a question of the data collection. The data collection part is really good. It's about understanding what is it that the end customer wants to know. Well, they obviously want to know when something fails in the system, but they also want to know when are we doing something really tricky? When are we actually navigating away from the process? And is that navigation intentional? Did someone actually just find a faster way to do the process than what we initially thought that this would be? And that becomes a really interesting part of the improved analytics system. On the notification side, I mean, people are working a lot on the notification side, especially on roles, expertise, how many times have you viewed things, the idea that you can push notifications to a single group. And you've probably all seen those emails going out to everyone in the organization saying, look, you cannot handle orders right now. And I'm sure that the receptionist didn't think that was really interesting, but she still gets the email. Now, the idea of delivering that inside the desk is obviously ingenious, because you will only touch the people that are actually influenced by that particular event. We can also see that a lot of the desks are doing improved RPA, because once you have the identification, you can fill in a text field. You can probably do a lot of things automated, and especially if you're inside some really tricky systems where you have to redo processes, type the same address 7 times. Those types of things, you will see dashes that actually improve in the RPA area as well. And then I think the most natural place to look is obviously that every single desk wants to have an improved contextualization, meaning that in the context of the user, we want to be able to provide them with the best possible suggestion for the process. There's some not that natural as features as well that I'll touch a little bit on. They're a little bit outside. So one is on the improved content maintenance, that I touched a little bit on the idea that you should probably expect from your desk when you do an update, you should be able to automatically test whether your entire desk works or not. And you should be able to get that quality assurance before you actually roll that out. Now, we've been doing a lot of work in this area, and I think we've come to some, and it's been a natural part of our solution, but I can see that other vendors are moving in the same direction. I think it's really important in terms of how much time are you going to spend with each vendor update. Now remember, 178 apps 4 times annually. It requires a little bit of due diligence in order to make sure that it's actually. We can also see that a lot of stuff is happening on process analytics. This is a really interesting area. It's not a new area as such. The idea of business process mining has existed for a long time. The idea is now that inside the dash, we can start to evaluate deviations around a particular process. It obviously requires that we have an understanding of what is the user trying to do, or what is he most likely trying to do. But the idea around business process mining is dating back to the 90s, but this is definitely, especially with machine learning coming into the picture, becoming an entirely new discipline. And you will see growing in that area. That will be able to tell you how many people are actually deviating from the process you set out, and how are they deviating? Are they effectively reaching the same results, or are they not? So those are some of the intelligent decisions on outside the desk. There's something around intelligent content. I mean, if you create content for 2 different versions of your system, you should be able to automatically highlight the changes for your end user. This is part of intelligent content. But it also covers things like, can you provide a video? If I want to see a video of how should I do this, I should be able to do that inside the system without, necessarily navigating. I should have full voiceover. I should be able to get that without anything other than just doing the basic reporting on my process. And these are some of the areas that we can also see that DASs are moving into. It's one of our key areas as well. Now, if you imagine that the idea around natural language engines, it's probably touching a little bit in on the AI side, but if you're getting to the natural language engine, it obviously becomes a discipline on its own to understand what is it that the user is asking. To have an effective chatbot that will be able to understand the user's requests and deliver the right processes at the moment. And some heavy work is going into this area, and I'm going to cover a little bit of it on this later. So I think that these are some of the boundaries that are being pushed, but remember that most of the stuff that's actually happening in most of your DAS systems are very, very simple stuff, like making sure that you can now get the speech bubble in green instead of red. And I can promise you it's not going to impact your end user performance at all. But still, this is something that a lot of DASs are trying to play catch up with. So let me tell you about the AI and the areas of application inside the. This is super interesting. There's a lot of solutions out there that are saying that they're completely based on. They have a natural AI engine. I think that it sounds a little bit like magic. So it's probably not always real. So I imagine that most people want to actually test out what does that AI provide and how well is it function. But some of the new trends that we can see is absolutely on the content context realization. Now imagine that you have the input of 4,000 users inside your business, and they are all contributing in terms of the best content context realization. This is a candidate for AI. So every time you present more than one process for the end user in a particular context, and they select one, you have a result. Now combine that with the user's role inside the business, what they have access to in terms of the application, and that level of expertise. You will get very high functioning ML on top of it. And this is definitely a candidate. We're going to see a lot more on the content contextualization side, moving away from algorithms and to a much higher extent, moving into ML. A natural algorithm that kicks in the beginning, but after that, absolutely a learning system behind that becomes wiser as we move on. There's something on process improvement as well. We mentioned the process mining. This is something that we are going to see more and more AI inside the business process. The idea that we have a defined process here, we can see where you are going away from your process, and we can use that information to actually optimize the process on the authoring side. And this is definitely also an AI area. Then there's some really funky new solutions coming up. So Adapt is one of them, based entirely on AI and inflection AI. These are all guys that came from the OpenAI and the ChatGPT that most of you have probably seen. The idea that suddenly, I guess it kind of rocked our world that someone could actually write poetry on a specific subject, or give me 400 lines on the moon landing, and it was actually qualified. The idea that we can now have natural, broad intelligence, general intelligence applications is, of course, very interesting. Now, Adapt and Inflection are some of the companies that are working on this area, and basically what they're doing is that they're training the application. There's some promising technology. I gotta tell you that I can see from the investor side at least that they seem to find a lot of promise in this. I think that most investors are willing to take a technological risk much more than a business risk. So I think that there's a very high risk on the technology side that this will simply not work. But the idea is basically build up general user intelligence on a number of different platforms collected among thousands and thousands of users. So you can basically say, look, I want to complete my time registration, and it will take you through the entire process. And all based on seeing other users do exactly the same process. Now, there's some big catches, and the scientists are not completely in agreement on whether this is going to work or not. But obviously, the people at Adept and Inflection AI, they seem to think that it's going to work. And these are some really smart guys around the AI side. We are definitely, with all the AI and the user adoption in a box, we are also leading towards a fully automated app. That's like the end start goal for all of these AI implementations, that at the end of the day, you will be able to communicate effectively in natural language with your application, will do whatever you're telling. And this is definitely something that a lot of people are working on. I don't think that we're going to see the end results of that in 2023, but perhaps in a few years' time, we're going to see something that is really astonishing, just like the chat. All right, so a couple of ridiculous predictions around 2023. So we're going to see interoperability between vendor products, especially on the DaaS vendor side. We're going to see them opening up their own APIs. We're going to see them engage with other content providers. We're going to see multiple being able to service inside the same front end. That's going to be one of the things that we need here, because otherwise the price is going to go down, and we're going to simply see too many rebuys. And at the end of the day, we are only punishing the enterprises, and it makes no sense. I think there's some final solutions to the maintenance problem. The idea that you're bringing in, and we are very close to that now, idea that you're bringing in vendor updates, and those vendor updates, you're capable of automatically not only testing, but also ensuring that your content works. Now, we've built in some upgrade capabilities inside our applications. We're, for instance, capable of upgrading between PC versions. So basically means when you're taking on a new version of PC, we'll make sure that the entire recording set is completely set in stone for you. It's a very simple process. Everything works after that. I think that the DaaS today is a single category, and it's basically around the speech bubble. It's becoming very, very difficult because most customers are actually asking for traditional e-learning. No one asks to be disrupted in the sense of a digital adoption. They want the traditional learning. They are buying into the idea of learning in the flow of work, but they still want to have the traditional test me videos, the traditional try me videos, and a simple viewing option for the end user, perhaps inside the application. But the idea of having training modes, I think we're going to see more. And I think that DaaS will become multiple categories along the way. So some will be DaaS Plus with capabilities. Some will be isolating only DaaS, saying that training is dead forever. Probably not. But we're going to see multiple categories coming up, potentially also multiple Gartner categories. I think that on the utilization side, I'm 100% sure that we're going to see some brilliant solutions in 2023 around that area. I know that we are coming out with something on the machine learning side. So that will simply be implemented and will automatically improve the contextualization of what you're presenting for your end users. You don't need to consider anymore where do you want this space and in what scenarios and depending on what button. All of that is handled by a machine. And I think that we have some very promising results on that. So the vendor partner enterprise triangle, it will be solved now and it requires the interoperability, or it requires one product to win, preferably mine. But if that's not the case, I think there'll still be a lot of digital adoption vendors out there. And I think that it's important that we find a solution for the vendor partner enterprise, because the idea of having multiple DaaS editing interfaces, multiple ways of distributing, and being unable to actually catch all the stuff that's coming from the vendor automatically, and thereby saving a ton of money in developing these applications, I think we're going to have to solve that from a DaaS perspective. And I'm open to anyone on the solution side that want to take up that debate. I think that we're going to see more specialization. So I think that we're going to see more vendors moving into single application spaces. Saying, look, we're not doing everything. We're doing this, but we're doing it really, really well. We're doing it better than anyone else. And those ideas, I think, will have to mature over time. I think the catch-all desk will probably, at least in some scenarios, be in competition with vendor specialization. And then it's all about the interoperability, how well we can actually make that work. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. I think my voice is slowly starting to disappear. But I would like to thank everyone, as they say in the airline industry. I know you have other options. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks for staying. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And we'll make sure we'll come back and answer them for everyone after the session. So thank you.